Idaho Matters is brought to you in part by St. Luke's Pharmacy, now offering free home delivery. For daily medications or one time prescriptions, home delivery is easy to set up. It's convenient and safe. St. Luke's Pharmacy, now delivering to your doorstep. Information on how to get started at stlukesonline.org.
Love Boise State Public Radio podcasts? They are free to enjoy, but not free to produce. If you can give, your support helps keep shows like Idaho Matters and Scandalize available to everyone. Donate now at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. In less than a week, Idahoans will head to the polls to vote in the primary election, and early voting is already underway. So today, Idaho Secretary of State Phil McGrain is joining us to talk about everything we need to know before casting our ballots. Phil, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Gemma. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, so let's just start with the basics. When is Election Day?
Tuesday, May 19th. So next Tuesday, it's coming quickly, and it's a very important election in terms of selecting who's going to lead our state, both at the federal level, the state level, and our local county level as well.
So this is a primary election, and there are folks who've never voted before, new voters out there. Can you explain quickly the difference between a primary election and then a general election? Because Tuesday, May 19th is a primary election.
It is the primary. And so the basic process is this is the time where each of the political parties select their nominees to head to the general election. There are a few elections like judges and other things that the decisions will be made on May 19th. But overwhelmingly, this is when the Republican Party will select its nominees, the Democratic Party will select its nominees, and then they will move forward to the general election. But in a state like Idaho's, it's really important to highlight there are often instances where either the Democratic nominee who selected the Republican may not have an opponent in the general election. And so the decisions really are being made here during the May primary election.
And Phil, early voting has already started. So tell us how this works and who can early vote and where do folks figure out where they would go for early voting?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is make a plan to vote. If you aren't available on Tuesday the 19th and you want to get in, there's lots of opportunities for early in-person voting. Both today and tomorrow, in-person early voting will be through this week. And you can go to voteidaho.gov to find all the information you need, whether you need to find your polling place information, whether you want to find information about early voting, or also just confirming that you're registered. And I will say one of the best advantages on our website in terms of planning is our personalized sample ballots. You can actually see an image of the ballot you'll be voting on so you can know what are the races you're going to see when you get there and what are the candidates for each of those races in case you want to do any personal research at home to look into what the decisions are. Because yes, we have a United States Senate race and we have the governor's race, but there are also many other down ballot races that you'll be deciding on.
So I want to talk next about our specific primaries in the state of Idaho because we have what's called closed primaries. Can you explain exactly what that means? Because I think it can be confusing even for folks maybe who are newer voters and might go to the primary expecting to see certain names on the ballot. And depending upon your party affiliation, you may not be voting for that individual.
That's a really good question, Gemma, and something for voters to prepare for. So because it is a primary and it is partisan, one of the first questions you're going to be asked after you've been asked to show your ID, to check in your registration, they'll ask you which ballot you want. You can select either the Democratic ballot, the Republican ballot, or the nonpartisan ballot. But as you mentioned, it's all dependent upon what your current registration is. So the Republican Party has left its primary closed, meaning only registered Republicans are allowed to participate in the Republican primary. And the Democratic Party has left theirs open. So any member of any political party is allowed to select a Democratic ballot. You only get to select one. There is also a nonpartisan ballot, but the nonpartisan ballot doesn't have a whole lot that people will be voting on. Most notably is there's a judicial race here locally that is a decision, but that judicial race will be on all ballots, regardless of party type. And so being prepared for those questions when you get in makes a difference. If you aren't registered with a political party, you are allowed to register with that party on election day, but that's only if you aren't currently a member of another political party.
And as you mentioned, Phil, let's say you're someone who just does not want a party affiliation, because we should note we have more unaffiliated registered voters in Idaho than we even have, people who are registered as Democrats. So a lot of people don't want that party affiliation, so they can vote. It's just they're going to have a very limited ballot come Tuesday.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. We see it in just people's voting. Often I hear people like, I vote for the person, not the party. They make different choices depending on what office it is and who they think is the best candidate. That all makes perfect sense. For the primary, though, it still is a nomination process for the political party. So when you go to the polls, you will be asked to make that partisan choice, and you will only see those members. In the general election, when we get to November, you can make any choice you want. All the candidates will be fair game, but be preparing for that. I also think it's a good opportunity if you go to voteidaho.gov, pull up the personalized sample ballot. You can see what each of the political party ballots look like beforehand and make the determination on which one makes the most sense based on either your current party affiliation, or if you're not affiliated, you can actually make a decision on whether you want to affiliate or you just want the nonpartisan ballot.
So what about ballot initiatives? Will we won't see those on the primary ballot, and I think this is important to talk about because these ballot initiatives, the ones that we could see in November, have gotten quite a bit of attention.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of news coverage right now, and that's because the initiative circulation process just ended. So the initiative circulators have turned them into the county clerk's offices to verify all the signatures on the petitions. That's what's taking place right now. It is not determined yet whether any of the initiatives have made it to the November ballot. It'll be around the end of June in the beginning of July, that we'll know which initiatives make it to the November ballot. So you'll hear a lot more conversation about initiatives and the constitutional amendments headed into November. There aren't any of those decisions. Depending on where you live, you might have a school bond or levy that you could be voting on, but even those are just here, and it just really depends on where you live and whether your local school district is doing something like that.
So let's get back to who's on the primary ballot on Tuesday the 19th. You mentioned judicial candidates. So there are a handful of judicial races. One is a district court judge position in Ada County. There was a current district court judge who is retiring. So when it comes to district judges, they can run for election. This is what's happening. There is a little bit of confusion around one of the candidates who is running in Ada County. I believe there are three attorneys running for this position. And it has come to the attention that one of these judges may not be qualified. And can you explain this to us? Because it is that someone who wants to become a judge must be an attorney for 10 years. And this particular individual will hit that 10-year mark in October before the general election, but not before the primary election. So are they qualified or are they not?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the things that part of our office does when candidates file is we go through the process of verifying the qualifications. In most offices, that just means you live in the district, that you've lived there long enough. Occasionally, there are additional qualifications. So really easy examples, like for the attorney general or the county prosecutor, they must be licensed members of the Idaho Bar. The judicial races are particularly unique. And we will say numerous judicial races, but most of them, it's the incumbent judge who's running. In this case, we have an open seat. So it's why you see three candidates who are running for it. There are numerous qualifications. So to be a district judge, you have to be a member of the Idaho Bar for at least 2 years, but also need to be a member of any bar for a 10-year period. And that's one of those tough things. So as I always say, even if you're a member of the Puerto Rico Bar, it would qualify. We're not as easily able to verify, and it falls into this weird gap. Judicial races, kind of like we were talking about the primary being the nomination process. What's unique about judicial races is if somebody gets a majority, more than 50% on May 19th, then May 19th is the election. If none of the candidates get a majority, then the election moves to November 3rd, and that will be the election. So the law is ambiguous. We've worked with the Attorney General's office, and I've consulted with the Idaho Supreme Court. The law needs cleaned up realistically. So for the time being, all the candidates will be able to be voted on here for the May election. And then just depending on the outcomes, what happens on May 19th, there may be more questions to resolve these qualification issues.
Okay, so let's say this individual gets the majority of the votes come May 19th. they would not have met that 10-year qualification until November 3rd. So that is where there might be some murky waters to have to look into, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, I think you touched on it perfectly. There's an odd situation that can be created at how the law currently reads, in that if this particular individual got a majority on May 19th, they would have won, but may not be qualified. Whereas if they don't get a majority on May 19th and it goes to a runoff in November, they could be qualified and win then. There's obviously also the very real potential that one of the other candidates gets a majority. So there's a lot of different parts and ways that this could go. And it's interesting for us to see a lot of attention drawn to a judicial race. These are not the races that usually rise to the top in terms of attention. But doesn't matter what election it is, our office is watching it closely and making sure that it'll go smoothly. I was the one to personally notify all the candidates in this process of the situation. So we're in direct communication with them as we head into Election Day.
All right. And before I let you go, Phil, we've talked about early voting still happening right now. How about requesting an absentee ballot? Has that deadline passed?
That deadline has passed. So last week was the deadline for that. If you have an absentee ballot, I strongly encourage you to get it in. All ballots must be turned into the county clerk's office by 8 p.m. when the polls close. So just knowing getting it through the mail and the postal service, I encourage anybody who has an absentee ballot, get it voted, drop it in one of the local drop boxes, or stick it in the mail now so that you can ensure that your vote will be counted next week. I think one of the other things to note too that, is special here in Idaho, we have same day registration. So if you recently moved here, you've been here for 30 days, you can still go to the early voting locations this week, or next Tuesday, you can show up to your polling location. And if you bring your government issued photo ID and proof of residence, you can register and vote at the same time.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking time. I know how busy you are, in particular this time of year. We've been talking with Idaho Secretary of State Phil McGrain, talking about Tuesday's upcoming primary election on May 19th. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Idaho Matters. And for quick news of the day, start your mornings with our podcast. It's called The Connector, Idaho Daily News. Are you subscribed to this Idaho Matters podcast yet? Make sure you're following so you never miss an episode. Hi, Idaho Matters podcast listeners. If you're on your smartphone right now, or if you have it nearby, I wanted to pop in to tell you about something to check out. Boise State Public Radio is now on Nextdoor. Here's what that means. Trusted local news, thoughtful reporting, and stories from across Idaho right along your neighborhood updates. If you already have the Nextdoor app, you're halfway there. Just search Boise State Public Radio and hit follow.